Hello, I am Michael Marsh, and ordinarily I talk about how to get our Constitution back and all that, both the state and national levels. But today I'm going to be talking about something else, because we all have to eat, and if we don't, it doesn't matter what kind of system of government there is, because there won't be one. But in the last election, there was an interesting initiative on the ballot. It said we want labels for GMOs, and I noticed that neither side, really defined what was meant by that. Mm-hmm. And I have noticed that like growing up, gluten was not a problem. Now it's a big problem. So something's happening, and that's why I invited Rachel Hanson on with me. She is a nutrition coach for for natural grocers here in Salem. And so Rachel, tell us a little bit about your background and how you became the nutrition coach and what it is you teach.
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Rachel Hanson. I work at Natural Grocers. So I got my degree in nutrition science at Oregon State University. So I love all the beavers, right? So I got it in nutrition science as well as chemistry. And as soon as I graduated, I decided to join the Peace Corps, and I was an environmental worker. And so I volunteered in northern Tanzania, where I was able to work closely with a lot of village farmers, which really neat way to see, actual farming practices instead of going to the grocery store and picking everything out. So as soon as I got home about a year ago, I decided to apply for a job at Natural Grocers. I really liked their standards and what they were about, and they have a really neat position where they hire and train nutritionists at each store. And so I've been working there, like I said, just about a year, and immensely learning so much. So yeah.
Okay. Now, do you teach what the labels mean, and or is there really a standard right now for labels? That's one of the things I'm wondering, because we hear about range-grown chickens, for instance. Mm-hmm. Okay, what does that actually mean, or range-grown cows?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do teach at our stores, we have, like I said, some of the things that I guess would set us apart. We do have a trained nutritionist on staff, and so part of my job and a lot of the other positions, we teach nutritional classes to the public, as well as go out into the community and teach, and I teach one-on-one with people. So some of those classes do definitely bring in how to teach about labels. So I believe it's April 14th, we're actually having a class at the store. It's a Tuesday, I think, at 5:15, and we are teaching, how to read labels, because it is such a big thing, and it's very, very hard for people sometimes to read them. I was recently in a different store and was trying to pick out some chicken, and it's almost become a marketing ploy versus just giving you the information, and so that's been a big thing. Yeah.
Okay. So in your studies, have you learned why the food that we're eating is different now than it was? What has happened? For instance, ate lots of bread growing up.
Yeah.
Everybody did.
Yeah. So there have been some major changes. Like, I like to go back to really where we kind of came from, right? So about 40,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers, right? So we are biologically still made to be eating that way, not be eating this mass-produced type food. So, we spend all of this time as hunter-gatherers. So we're going out and we're gathering nuts and we're gathering seeds and we're killing our own animals, and it's not this big agricultural era, right? And so it was about 10 to 12,000 years ago that we then started to move more into the agricultural, we call it the agricultural revolution. So we were then we were still hunting and gathering, and we were still going out and getting our food, but we were actually, starting to plant things, deciding, hey, this is delicious, let's plant some more of it. But it was a really slow transition to actually fully be in that agricultural revolution. And then after that, you know, we had, I think 400 years ago, it was the introduction of refined sugars. So that, you know, we're now deciding what we get to eat, or, you know, what we want and what tastes good, which isn't always the most nutritious, but that's kind of out of the window now. And, you know, when we introduced refined sugars, it was not as big of a deal 400 years ago as it is now, because back then they say, you know, maybe it was 20 teaspoons per person per year, right? That's not that much. Do you know how on average today, how many teaspoons they say an average American eats?
Probably a lot more than what they did in a year back then.
Yes, about 28 a day. And so that adds up to be like 150 pounds a year of sugar, where before it was, you know, 20 teaspoons. And so then it used to be that the sugar was actually, I mean, it still had minerals and vitamins and a lot of nutrient components to it, where now it's so refined and a lot of it's genetically modified, which we'll talk about later. But so that was a big, big change. And then the next part of that is definitely the Industrial Revolution, you know, where this was, you know, 1800s, and we're actually, you know, more factories. Not everybody is living on a farm anymore, and they're a little bit more in urban areas, and so we have to bring the food to them, right? You don't go outside and just grab your food. So, and then I would say definitely in the last 100 years, things have really changed. So, you know, the first big one would be the introduction of food giants. So the end of the 1800s up to maybe, you know, the early 1900s, they're realizing that, okay, if everybody is in the urban area, how are you going to get your food? You know, you need to have it brought to you. And so they're realizing that by refining grains and taking out the nutrients, is what actually spoils the food, right? So I'm sure when you were younger, you'd have bread that was made at home, right? And not
sometimes,
and not store-bought. And they realize, okay, well, having all of these fresh nutrients in it, and not necessarily in a bad way, but just more in a let's cater to the public. And so that was really a big lead into refining things and preserving them, and introduction of preservatives. And so the other big part would be World War II. So in, you know, late 1939 to 1945, we had to feed, you know, us, we had to feed our allies, our soldiers. So they had to realize even more to refine things to then send them overseas, because how would you keep everybody happy if they didn't have food? So,
But if they're refining the food, the nutrients out, and that's what keeps us going.
And so, but it's also what spoils the bread so quickly, or not just the bread, but all of the foods. And so, I don't know, do you ever remember when, like, the change, well, I don't know, the change of margarine and butter and things like that? You know, we realized how important butter was, so we would send it to our soldiers because it was a good food. And now, at home, what would we get? Margarine, hydrogenated oils that never go bad. They even used to put yellow food dye in it so that it would actually look like butter, even though it wasn't. And
my mom told me about that change.
She did, definitely. I know,
that,
it's interesting to hear that, and you know, that's what, 70 years ago, so it's a whole pretty much a generation behind us. But so that's really been a big thing. And after that, I'm not sure if you're kind of familiar with how we actually got pesticides and things like that even started, but after the war, after, you know, we make all of these bombs to kill people, let's refine that, like change them a little bit and make them to kill all the insects and the pests. So they didn't want to just get rid of how do you get rid of all these chemicals, right? Nitrogen and things like that. So let's turn it into something that will help us. And it makes me a little bit sad about how it's ended up, but at the same time you can kind of see throughout why it was that, it came out to be that way.
But I guess, you know, recently there was some stir about some bees dying off because of pesticides. So, you know, we don't want to get rid of all the insects, obviously.
No, exactly. I mean, we actually need them. Surprise, surprise, These things we think are so bad actually do help us,
I definitely like the taste of honey. Plus,
yes.
they do
do
pollinate, and that brings up the GMO issue again. Because I know, farmers that use GMO are concerned about, pollination, and the ones that grow naturally, they don't want to be pollinated by, the other
The
stuff.
wrong stuff, yeah.
So how did we get into that position, and what can we do about that?
Yeah, well, I wish I had all the answers. But that is definitely one of the modern, the modern agricultural kind of the dangerous methods we've been using. A big, we're now adding all these chemicals and pesticides to everything. So then let's make some seeds that actually, some genetically engineered seeds that actually then can withstand these high amounts, because other things that are created by nature aren't really able to withstand that. So yeah, I mean, a big part of, I think, why people, are very into genetically engineered and things like that is to, the more food we can produce, the better, right? But what's that tipping point? So.
Yeah, and one of the concerns I have about that was, and I had mixed feelings on the actual initiative, because I do want to know what I'm eating.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do, yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want a bunch of lawyers involved. I don't necessarily think the government is the right remedy, because they usually make things worse.
Oh.
But so many companies are using genetic, and if it will kill the bug that they want to kill, what does it do to us?
Yeah, and that's a big concern too. And are there really any long-term human studies that actually show that is safe? There really aren't. One thing I love about working at Natural Grocers, we only feature having 100% organic produce. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but anything that's labeled 100% organic, you will be avoiding genetically engineered foods, which is a big thing. I mean, it's a nice way to know that within that label, and I don't know if that's really promoted enough or told enough to people, that if it has this seal on it, we were talking about labels too, that is it actually safe to have, right? So that's a big thing. And like the non-GMO Project Verified, have you seen a lot of that on different products now? That
starting to.
That's getting to be a big thing, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think people are realizing that we do want to know what is in our food and how dangerous some of these things can be. Yeah.
I mean, I love to eat.
Me too. Why do you think I got in the field? Yeah.
Yeah, but and there's enough health problems going around anyway. You don't need extra.
Yeah, definitely.
So are they starting to do studies on the long-term effects on humans of these products?
I believe they're actually starting to do some studies on it. The scary thing with that is that there's a lot of constraints within contracts, because a lot of the people that genetically are modifying these seeds or engineering them contract that they're the only ones that can do studies on it. So I don't know about you, but that doesn't really tell me it doesn't really give me a good perspective on it. It doesn't really give me the science on it. So
yeah, I would much rather somebody who wasn't going to be making money off of it did the study.
Yeah. So and I know there's a lot of people that were involved down in Jackson County to get a lot of things passed, and Josephine, and so it's really neat to see people get together and be a part of that.
Yeah, my sister lives in Josephine County, and she told me a little bit about that. Maybe you should tell us what they did there.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert on the law and that side of things. I really, but I definitely a basic of it from what I remember hearing. Our Natural Grocers down there, luckily I was able to contact the nutritional health coach down there. She was really big in the during the initiative and kind of making a change down there and being a center point for people and come in for extra education and things. And she was saying that, a lot of the farmers that were organically growing things, or maybe not even necessarily strictly organic, but just a farm that's not into genetically engineered seeds on their crops, they were noticing that, they were getting contamination all over and, in multiple different areas, and So they kind of came together to put together a ballot, or not a ballot, but a petition sort of to then have a bill for this. And that was, I think it was after I think it was like right before the vote or something. And so, within that era, and that they were doing this not necessarily just for labeling GMOs, but that the farmers they don't want in that county anybody to be growing GMO crops.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. But then the big thing for, I think, the other side is, well, where do you want us to grow them?
Yeah, that's true.
Nowhere. No.
Yeah, go back to natural.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned organic, and been seeing organic labels for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Now you mentioned 100% organic.
Yeah.
And okay, so is there different levels of organic?
There are, and that's a really good question that I think a lot of people get confused on, because you see 100% USDA organic, and then you see USDA organic without the 100%, and then you see made with organic ingredients, right? So do you know some of the differences of them?
No, that's why I'm asking.
I have a purpose, right?
Yeah.
So the USDA organic seal, I'll read you exactly what the USDA says. Like, certified organic means the farmer or producer has undergone regular inspection of the farm and the facilities, the ingredients, and the practices by an independent third party. So that's really great that there's a third party certifier. And so they're actually accredited by the USDA National Organic Program. So this happens about one time a year. So at least once a year that they're certified that they're practicing correctly. And so the use of synthetic pesticides, animal drugs, so if it's an animal product, there's no hormones, no antibiotics used as growth promoters or subtherapeutic doses, and no use of sewage sludge, which it's kind of scary that even has to be a stipulation in there.
Really?
No use of genetically modified organisms, irradiation, and chemical fertilizers are prohibited by organic growing, and production must meet and exceed USDA organic regulations. And I think a big thing about this to also imply when we see that USDA organic seal, but people will argue, well, it's from Mexico or it's from New Zealand. Well, for them to even be, have that seal on there, they must meet or exceed the U.S. standards. So, they are getting the third party certified. It's taken care of on that side. So for something that is 100% USDA organic, 100% of the ingredients will be organic. There will be no genetically modified organisms in there. So no GMO seeds, nothing like that. Are you familiar with some of the major GMO crops?
I know there's some, I've heard soybeans or...
Mm-hmm. So there's about 9.
I guess corn is actually originated.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah.
So
the major crops are going to be canola, which is from rapeseed, soy, cotton, and corn, right? So those are the top 4 major crops, which the percentage, so like canola or rapeseed, 90% of that that we use is by the USDA in 2009, they said that 90% of those were GMO. And then for corn, 88% of the corn that we have, which that's a huge percentage, right? And then soy is 93 and cotton is 93 also. So cotton, we don't really think like, oh, we're going to eat it, right? But that's actually a huge part of vegetable oil.
Oh.
Yeah. So those are the top 4. And then we have sugar beets, which to me, that's going to be a new upcoming one, where these are a new kind of front runner. And unless something is, cane, derived from cane sugar, or it's USDA organic, you can almost be assured that it is from a GMO sugar beet. And then we've got alfalfa, which, what are we doing with alfalfa, right? Feeding all
cows and all that.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And then, we've got yellow squash, and then zucchini are also ones. Mm. Yeah. And then Hawaiian papaya.
Okay, now, like, I know people that grow their own gardens. And they'll have squash and zucchini and stuff like that. Are these seeds?
So you would have to make sure that when you buy the seeds, like, I know I just went this weekend and bought some seeds for my garden too, and I was looking, and the USDA, they'll have a little seal on them where they'll say 100% organic seeds. So they would not be genetically modified, but I believe you would have to make sure to check that they actually are or are not genetically modified. Yeah. Yeah, which is scary because it's like, how's that getting in my garden? Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty thing. When you said that.
So then, if you see just the USDA organic seal and not the 100%, then that means less than 5% of those ingredients can be approved non-organic ingredients. So they will not be. They strictly prohibit the use of genetically modified organisms, even if it is 95% organic, which is nice. But once you get down into the made with organic ingredients, that is a minimum of 70% of that product has to be organic. And then the other 30%, they can be, they don't have to have that, approved organic product. So you could still find genetically modified organisms. Yeah. So do you know what a genetically modified organism is? Like what the definition of a GM crop would be?
Well, I would assume that it means that
it's genetically modified.
Created in a laboratory somewhere.
Yeah. So what they can do is take I guess I've heard too that genetically engineered is now more accurate because genetically modified can imply a lot of other things. But so that would be that they take like the selected gene from one species. So just a gene, like maybe it has a special characteristic to it that they want. Like maybe it can produce its own insecticide or herbicide, right? So then they'll actually force it into the DNA of another, like maybe a plant, like a corn, right? And they can do this, and what I've also heard is that they can then put in the antibiotics as well, so that when they test the seed to make sure it's working, and it actually took those genes that we've kind of shot, like literally you can take a specialized gun and shoot the DNA into it, right? And so we're forcing this to actually happen. We're forcing this to work together, where there's no natural selection, and like nature doesn't get to choose whether or not it works. So it's being forced. And a lot of the issues behind it is that we're actually, there's unpredictable side effects to it. There's not really, we're not sure what will happen.
That's another thing that I'm concerned about. Okay, let's say it works good and it's healthy and all that. Okay, if it's genetically modified or genetically engineered, okay, what about the next generation? Is there going to be a next generation? What happens if something happens? How do we backtrack? And that, I'm not sure if you've heard of Jeffrey Smith. He's, a big consumer advocate on this, and he explained GM crops as think of a book, right? And so you've taken out letters, you've removed chapters, you've moved around paragraphs. The ending is not the same anymore. It's not the same thing that it used to be, right? And so it will read a lot differently. And a big part of that is, what are those unpredictable side effects that I don't think, and I know a lot of other people in this area don't think that it's been around long enough to know those effects, And so, it's scary. And when, because God created plants that keep growing year after year for millions of years. Is man's crops going to go on millions of years?
And that's one thing that I've heard from Jeffrey Smith say is that we're contaminating the gene pool. What is the gene? What's going to be a real corn? What is going to be a real soybean? It gets so contaminated, and it's not the same as cross-pollination that can happen naturally by insects and wind, right? And it's not the same as grafting. I mean, I know definitely taking the branch of one and putting it onto some, nature decides that works, and it takes 50 plus years for us to select the right breed, but all of a sudden we can do it in a lab and it has to work.
Well, and people have been doing this forever, but they were related. Like my father, he grafted one kind of apple to another apple. We had an apple tree in his backyard. Okay, but from what I understand, they're putting things that aren't related together.
Yeah, I think the big difference with that is like they may not. Well, and you're talking about GMs versus like grafting and things like that. Yeah. And then the other part with you know, genetically engineered crops is they're selecting the genes that make their own insecticide, or they're able to withstand high amounts of, say, Roundup or something, and forcing that plant to do this, where if it's not meant to do that, it's not meant to do that. Yeah. And they're definitely linking a lot of issues of pesticide residue and, you know, Roundup to some serious diseases.
Well, you know, after Vietnam, there was a lot of people got sick, Agent Orange.
Mm-hmm.
So are we doing this with our food, you know, by by having these all this Roundup and putting it into the food supply?
Those are definitely some main big concerns. And you know, a lot of what we advocate is that we need to vote with our dollar, right? So vote every time you buy something that you know maybe is USDA organic and non-GMO verified. You're telling them, I want this on the market. I want this product. I don't want this other product that I don't know what's in it. You know, some of the derivatives, it's like corn is found in so many things, and dextrose, all maltodextrin, all, you know, like it's really hard to read a label and know, is this a derivative that could be from that? And I think that's a big passion of mine, big passion of Natural Grocers, is to educate people on that, you need to be your own advocate in a lot of that. So
that's why I have you on today to advocate to my audience. We've got a little over a minute and a half left.
Oh my gosh,
so
time flies.
anything you got to say you want people to know?
I'm not sure. What do you, I mean?
Well, if you have
covered.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure you got everything out you wanted to say. And by the way, we'll be doing some more programs. I'll probably have this one on as a constitutionalist because it's a regular time schedule, and then I might do the others as a Michael Marsh Presents, which actually plays more often, but it doesn't have a regular time schedule. But I want this one to be a regular time schedule. People can look for the Michael Marsh Presents or call the studio and find out when it's going to play.
Yeah, and I encourage anybody, if they feel like they, you know, want a little bit more information, I am always available at the Salem store. Feel free to come in. We have tons of classes, you know, tons of literature for people, and it's definitely, you know, getting the knowledge out there. So we always invite people to come in and kind of get that extra education. Yeah, and
her name is Rachel Hanson again, and she's nutrition coach at
Natural Grocers.
Natural Grocers. And so, you know, contact her and find out more, and watch the programs too.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on, and
Yeah,
like I
thank
said,
you
we
for
will
having
do
me.
some more programs.
Yeah, I'll be glad to be back.